Hey guys, welcome to Sleeping Stone Whispers. Tonight's story gently explores how poor families plan their meals with almost nothing, slow routines, quiet choices, and the calm patience of everyday survival. There's no rush here, no drama, just soft thoughts, simple food, and a steady rhythm meant to help your mind unwind. If you enjoy slow, boring stories that help you relax, sleep, or simply feel calm, this one is for you. Please like the video, subscribe to Sleeping Stone Whispers, and let these quiet stories stay with you every night. The morning began without urgency, as it usually did. Light entered the room slowly, not as a sharp beam but as a dull presence, settling on the floor and the walls without asking for attention. The house was quiet enough that even the sound of breathing felt noticeable, steady, and unimportant. No one spoke yet. There was no reason to hurry. The pantry door was opened with care, not because it was fragile, but because habits had formed over time. Inside, the shelves were mostly bare. A small bag of rice rested in one corner, thin enough that it no longer stood upright. There was a jar with a little salt at the bottom, and beside it, an onion that had already begun to soften. Nothing looked surprising. Nothing looked new. Breakfast was not discussed. It rarely was. The idea of food existed more as a plan than a meal, something to be arranged later, slowly. Water was poured into a pot and set aside, not yet placed on the fire. The morning air felt cool, and that alone seemed enough for now. Outside, the day continued in its ordinary way. Inside, the family remained calm, accepting the quiet start, knowing that planning would come next, and that this gentle, empty morning was simply the beginning of another careful day. The rice was poured onto a small metal plate, not all of it, only a portion that felt safe to use. The grains spread thinly, catching the pale morning light as it slipped in through the doorway. No one rushed to move them. They were left to rest where they landed, white and silent against the dull surface. Counting was not done aloud. It never was. The eyes moved slowly instead, estimating, remembering how much had been used the day before and how much must remain for tomorrow. A hand hovered over the plate, hesitating, then gently pushed a few grains aside. Those would be saved. The rest would become the day's meal. The early light made everything feel softer, less demanding. Even hunger seemed distant at this hour, as if it had not fully woken yet. The rice was gathered again, carefully, with fingers that already knew how to measure without tools. When the plate was finally set down, nothing had truly changed. There was still very little. But the counting had brought a sense of order, and for the moment, that was enough to begin the day. The clay pot sat near the wall, its surface darkened by years of smoke and slow cooking. It was not large, and it had never been large, but it had been enough for many days like this one. A thin crack ran along one side, carefully avoided each time it was lifted. The pot was treated gently, not out of fear that it would break, but because it had become familiar, almost dependable in its worn condition. Water was poured in first. That was always the beginning. The sound it made inside the pot was quiet and hollow, filling the empty space more than it filled the pot itself. The water level was checked twice, then once more, each time with a small tilt of the wrist. Too much water would waste fuel. Too little would demand more later. The balance mattered. The rice was still resting on the plate, waiting. It was not added immediately. There was a pause, long enough for thought but short enough to feel routine. Today's decision was not about taste or preference. It was about timing. If all the rice was used now, there would be nothing left for the evening. If too little was used, the meal would feel unfinished, and hunger would return too soon. A small portion was finally taken and dropped into the pot. The grains disappeared beneath the water without a sound. The rest was returned to the pantry shelf, folded into its cloth covering, placed carefully behind the jar of salt. Nothing was left out by accident. The pot was moved closer to the fire, but not directly onto it. The flame would come later, once everything was certain. Firewood was counted next. Short pieces were chosen instead of long ones. They burned slower and could be controlled more easily. Every choice was connected to another, forming a quiet chain of decisions that stretched beyond the morning. The clay pot waited, patient and unchanged. It had held thinner meals and thicker ones, meals stretched with water and meals reduced by necessity. Today would be no different. It would do what it always did, contain what little there was and make it feel like something whole. When the fire was finally lit, it was kept low. The pot warmed slowly, as if matching the pace of the house itself. Nothing bubbled yet. Nothing demanded attention. The decisions had been made, carefully and without discussion, and the day continued, steady and unremarkable, shaped quietly around that small clay pot. The lentils were not visible at first. They were remembered before they were seen, held in thought like a small reassurance that had carried over from the day before. Yesterday's meal had ended quietly, with just enough left to matter. Not enough to serve on its own, but enough to be considered, and consideration was important. The container was opened slowly, as if the contents inside needed time to be acknowledged. At the bottom, a thin layer of cooked lentils rested, darker now than they had been when first prepared. The surface had dried slightly overnight, forming a skin that was gently broken with the edge of a spoon. The smell was faint, familiar, unchanged. Nothing had spoiled. Nothing had improved either. These lentils were not a solution, only a support. They could not become a full meal again, but they could stretch one. Mixed with water, combined with rice, or warmed slowly to add weight to the pot, they offered options. Options mattered more than abundance. The spoon paused above the container. Using the lentils now meant the rice could last longer. Saving them meant tomorrow would feel less uncertain. The decision was not rushed. The lentils were stirred once, then left alone while other things were considered. Firewood. Water. Time. Eventually, the container was moved closer to the clay pot. A small amount was scooped out, less than half, and set aside. The rest was covered again, pressed gently so air would not reach it too quickly. It would wait. Waiting was something food here did well. When the lentils were added to the pot, they changed the color of the water slightly, turning it cloudy, thicker in appearance if not in substance. The pot accepted them without reaction. Nothing sizzled. Nothing stirred. It was all very calm. As the mixture warmed, the memory of yesterday's meal lingered, not as satisfaction, but as continuity. The same taste, repeated. The same texture, expected. There was comfort in knowing exactly what the food would be like before it was eaten. No one spoke about the lentils. They did not need attention or praise. They were simply part of the ongoing routine, one day blending into the next. When the pot was stirred, it was done slowly, deliberately, making sure nothing stuck to the bottom. Yesterday had ended with a small remainder. Today continued because of it. And that was enough to keep everything moving forward, quietly, without interruption, just as it always did. Water was always the first thing to enter the pot. This was not a rule written anywhere, but it had been followed for so long that it felt permanent. Before rice, before lentils, before any thought of flavor, water was poured in and allowed to settle. The pot sounded different when it held only water, lighter somehow, as if it was still deciding what it would become. The water came from the same container it always did. It was measured by sight, not by marks or lines. The level was checked once, then adjusted slightly, then checked again. Too much water would thin the meal until it barely counted as food. Too little would demand more ingredients later, and later was never guaranteed. Only after the water was right did the food feel allowed to follow. This order mattered. Water created space. It made small amounts look larger and last longer. It softened hunger before anything was eaten, simply by promising that something warm would exist. The pot was tilted gently so the water touched all sides. This helped prevent sticking later, or so it was believed. Belief played a quiet role in these routines. Some habits worked because they had always worked, or at least had never failed badly enough to be abandoned. The fire was still low when the water was added. There was no rush to make it boil. Heating too quickly wasted fuel, and fuel was counted just like rice. The water warmed slowly, almost patiently, thin steam beginning to rise long before bubbles appeared. Only then was food considered. The rice that had been counted earlier, the lentils remembered from yesterday, all of it waited until the water was ready. Adding food too soon felt wrong, as if it would not cook evenly or would demand more attention than could be given. When the grains finally entered the pot, they sank quietly, spreading out instead of clumping. This was the purpose of water first. It allowed everything to separate, to stretch, to become more than it was. A small handful of rice looked like more once it was floating freely. No one commented on this process. It happened the same way each day, regardless of how little there was. Water went in first. It always would. It was the simplest ingredient, yet the most important, turning scarcity into something manageable. As the pot rested on the fire, warming inch by inch, the water carried the weight of the meal. Food would follow, but water had already done most of the work, quietly preparing the way for whatever came next. The onion skins were not thrown away. They never were. When the onion was peeled, each dry layer was removed carefully and placed to the side, not because it was useful right away, but because it might be useful later. This habit had formed slowly, over years, until it no longer felt like a choice. It was simply how things were done. The skins were thin and papery, curling in on themselves as they dried further. Their color had deepened over time, moving from pale brown to something closer to gold. They were kept in a small cloth pouch near the cooking area, light enough to be forgotten, but never ignored completely. Every few days, someone checked to see how many had collected there. On their own, the skins were nothing. They could not fill a stomach or make a meal. But added to water, they changed it slightly. A faint color appeared. A mild smell followed. The water felt warmer, fuller, as if it had remembered something. That was enough to justify keeping them. When food was scarce, even the idea of flavor became important. Onion skins offered a suggestion of it, without costing anything more. They were added only when the pot felt too empty, when rice and lentils alone seemed too thin to carry the meal. 1 or 2 skins were enough. More would be wasteful. The act of saving them was slow and quiet. There was no special container, no label. Just a place they belonged. Children learned early not to throw them away, even before they understood why. It was corrected gently, without explanation. Understanding would come later, through repetition. Sometimes the skins were not used at all. They sat untouched for days, waiting. Other times, they were dropped into the pot along with water, left to soften and release whatever they had left behind. They were always removed before serving. No one ate them. They had already done their work. This habit did not make meals better in any obvious way. It did not turn thin soup into something rich. But it added a sense of care, a feeling that nothing had been entirely wasted. That mattered more than taste. When the pot simmered quietly and the smell of warm water and onion drifted through the room, it felt familiar. Not comforting, exactly, but steady. The onion skins had served their purpose, just as they always did, quietly supporting a meal without asking for recognition. In the end, saving them was less about what they added and more about what they represented. Even the smallest things were worth keeping. Even what looked like waste could become part of the routine. And that belief, repeated day after day, stayed as constant as the meals themselves. The flour was kept in a small tin, its lid pressed down tightly to keep out air and insects. When it was opened, there was never much inside. Just enough to cover the bottom, forming a thin white layer that looked more like a memory of flour than a supply of it. Still, the lid was opened carefully, as if abundance might be hiding underneath. A mother's hand reached in, not to take a full scoop, but to gather a small pinch. The flour clung to her fingers, soft and dry, leaving pale lines in her skin. That single handful was all that would be used today. The rest would stay behind, undisturbed, for another time. Stretching it began with water. Water always came first. A few drops were added slowly, mixed in with steady movements, turning the flour into something that could be shaped. The dough was thin, softer than usual, but workable. It was pressed and folded, then pressed again, coaxed into becoming more than it was. No measurements were used. None were needed. Years of repetition had taught her exactly how much water would make the dough hold together without demanding more flour. Too dry, and it would crack. Too wet, and it would spread uselessly. Balance came from practice, not precision. The dough was divided almost without looking. Each piece was smaller than a child's palm, flattened carefully so it would cook evenly. Thin bread cooked faster and used less fuel. It also felt larger on the plate, even if it wasn't. This was another quiet lesson learned over time. As the bread cooked, it puffed slightly in places, creating the illusion of fullness. The smell was gentle, familiar, not strong enough to excite hunger, but enough to remind everyone that food was coming. The bread was turned once, then once more, watched closely so it would not burn. When it was done, the pieces were stacked together, wrapped in cloth to keep them warm. They looked like more than they were when placed side by side. That was part of the method too. This way of cooking was not written down or taught in words. It was passed through observation, through hands watching hands. Stretching one handful of flour was not about trickery or cleverness. It was about patience, control, and knowing exactly how far something could go without falling apart. By the time the bread was served, no one thought about how little flour had been used. They only saw that there was something to eat. And for that moment, the method had worked, quietly and completely, just as it always did. The firewood was arranged with care before it was lit. Short pieces were placed first, followed by longer ones that had already been used once and saved. Nothing was fresh if it did not need to be. Each piece had a purpose, and none were placed without thought. The fire was not meant to be strong. It was meant to last. When the flame caught, it did so slowly, moving from one edge of the wood to another, never rushing. The sound was soft, a faint crackle that filled the quiet without interrupting it. Everyone waited. Waiting was part of cooking, just as important as stirring or measuring. Uneven fire wasted food. Too much heat too quickly could burn the bottom of the pot, ruining what little was inside. Too little heat would leave grains half-cooked, forcing the fire to be relit later, using more wood than planned. The goal was evenness, a steady warmth that asked for patience. The pot was positioned slightly to the side of the flame, not directly over it. This allowed the heat to rise gently, touching the clay without overwhelming it. The pot was turned once, then left alone. Turning it too often disturbed the balance. Leaving it untouched showed trust in the setup. The firewood burned at its own pace. One piece darkened faster than the others, curling inward as it softened. It was nudged gently with a stick, moved just enough to share its heat. Nothing was forced. The fire was guided, not controlled. As time passed, the smell of warm food began to mix with the scent of smoke. It was faint, barely noticeable, but familiar. The sound of the pot changed too, from silence to a low murmur, water shifting gently inside. No one leaned in to check too often. Lifting the lid released heat, and heat was valuable. This waiting was not idle. Eyes watched the fire. Ears listened for changes. Hands stayed ready, but still. Cooking this way required attention without action, a calm alertness learned through repetition. Children learned early not to play near the fire during this time. Not because it was dangerous, but because distraction led to mistakes. A fire left unattended could burn too fast or die too soon. Balance depended on presence. When the fire finally settled into an even glow, steady and predictable, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing it had been done correctly. The wood was burning evenly. The pot was warming evenly. The food would cook evenly too. The meal was not divided with numbers, but with memory. There were no marks on the pot, no lines on the bowl, no written plan. Still, everyone involved understood that what sat warming over the fire was not meant for one time alone. It was meant to last beyond itself. The pot was moved slightly away from the flame before serving. This was the first sign that the meal would be split. Food meant to be eaten all at once stayed hot and close. Food meant to stretch was cooled gently, encouraged to pause. Cooling made it easier to judge, easier to control. A ladle dipped into the pot slowly. Not all the way to the bottom. That would disturb the balance. The first portion was poured into a bowl and set aside. It was smaller than a full serving, but not so small that it felt disappointing. This was important. The first meal had to feel complete, even if it wasn't. The surface of the pot was then smoothed with the ladle, as if erasing the mark of what had been taken. The remaining food was checked quietly. Its thickness mattered. If it was too thick, water would be added later. If it was too thin, it would be left as it was and eaten carefully. No one announced that this was only half. Saying it aloud made it feel smaller. Silence allowed the mind to accept it without resistance. Plates were passed, portions placed evenly, each one looking much like the next. Fairness was visible, even if fullness was not. While eating, the pace was slow. Bites were small. Chewing took longer than necessary. This was not forced, only learned. Eating slowly allowed the body to believe it had received more. It also gave the mind time to adjust to the idea that this was enough for now. The second meal existed only as a thought. It was not discussed, but it shaped everything. Bowls were scraped clean, not out of hunger, but out of habit. Nothing was wasted that might belong to later. When the meal ended, the pot was covered again, its contents reduced but protected. The remaining food was moved to the side, away from heat, away from movement. It would rest until needed. Sometimes it was eaten the same day. Sometimes it waited until morning. Either way, it had been planned for. This was the silent math. Not adding or subtracting, but sensing. Knowing how much could be eaten now without stealing from later. Knowing how little could be saved without becoming useless. It was a calculation done without effort, refined through repetition. By the time the bowls were empty and the fire reduced to embers, the division was complete. One meal had quietly become two. No one felt full. No one felt surprised. The balance had held, and that was enough to move on to the next quiet part of the day. Thin soup was never meant to impress anyone. It was not rich, and it did not promise satisfaction on its own. Still, it was always served first, before anything solid touched the plate. This order had been followed for so long that no one questioned it anymore. The soup was mostly water, carrying just enough rice, lentils, or vegetables to change its color. It moved easily in the bowl, barely leaving a trace when lifted with a spoon. Steam rose from it gently, warming the face before it warmed the stomach. That warmth mattered. Serving thin soup first calmed hunger. It softened the sharp edge of it, making the body feel attended to even before real eating began. After a few slow sips, the urgency faded. The stomach felt occupied, and patience returned. This made smaller portions feel more reasonable. There was also a practical reason. Thin soup cooled quickly, which meant it could be eaten without waiting. Waiting with an empty stomach made people restless. Starting with soup kept everyone still, seated, quiet. The meal unfolded slowly, without interruption. The soup also prepared the mouth. After tasting something warm and mild, even plain food felt more substantial. Bread tasted softer. Rice felt heavier. What followed seemed richer simply because it came second. Bowls were filled carefully, never to the edge. Spilling wasted water, and water carried the effort of fuel and time. Each bowl looked similar, fairness again showing itself through appearance. No one checked anyone else's portion. They trusted the routine. Children learned early not to rush through the soup. Drinking it too fast defeated its purpose. Slow sips were encouraged, though rarely spoken about. The pace was set by example, not instruction. When the bowls were empty, they were set aside quietly. The soup had done its work. Hunger had been dulled. The body felt warmer. The mind felt less demanding. Only then was the rest of the meal served, smaller than it might have been otherwise, but accepted without complaint. Thin soup did not fill the stomach completely. That was never its job. Its role was to prepare, to soften, to make less feel like enough. It carried the meal forward without drawing attention to itself. By the time the plates were cleared, the reason for serving soup first no longer mattered. What mattered was that the order had held. The routine had worked again. And once more, a simple bowl of thin soup had quietly made the rest of the meal possible. The beans were small and hard, gathered from a bag that had been opened many times before. They were never cooked the same day they were chosen. That was understood. Beans required time, and time was something that could be given even when other things were scarce. In the evening, when the fire had already been reduced and the pots were cooling, the beans were measured out. Not many. Just enough to justify the effort. They were poured into a bowl and rinsed slowly, the water turning slightly cloudy before being tipped away. This was done twice, sometimes 3 times, until the water looked clear enough. Fresh water was added after that, covering the beans completely. The bowl was left near the wall, away from feet and movement. No lid was placed on top. The beans needed air, or so it was believed. Belief shaped many parts of the routine. Once soaking, the beans were forgotten on purpose. Checking them too often did not make them soften faster. They would do their work while everyone slept. This was one of the few processes that did not require watching. Overnight, the beans absorbed water slowly. They swelled without sound, changing shape while the house remained still. By morning, they would be larger, gentler, easier to cook. Soaking meant less fuel later, and fuel was always counted. In the morning light, the bowl was returned to the cooking area. The water was inspected, then poured off carefully. It carried away some of the heaviness, leaving the beans behind, softer and ready. They no longer looked like something that would fight the fire. Cooking soaked beans was easier. They broke down faster, thickened water more quickly, and made small meals feel heavier. This was the reward for waiting. The routine never changed. Beans chosen in the morning waited until evening. Beans chosen in the evening waited until morning. There was no reason to hurry them. Rushing beans only wasted wood and attention. Children learned this routine early. Beans meant tomorrow, not now. Understanding that difference mattered. It taught patience without words, showing that some meals were built long before they were eaten. When the beans finally entered the pot, they did so quietly, without resistance. The soaking had done its job. Time had already softened them. The fire only needed to finish what waiting had begun. By the time the meal was ready, the bowl used for soaking had been washed and set aside again, ready for the next time. The routine completed itself, unchanged, dependable. Soaking beans all night was not exciting or noticeable, but it was one more small way the household made careful planning feel normal, and scarcity feel manageable. The salt was kept in a small jar, always sealed tightly. It was never left open, never set carelessly near the fire. Moisture ruined it, and wasting salt was unthinkable. Even when the jar was lifted, it was done with both hands, as if it held something fragile. There was very little inside. Just enough to coat the bottom, forming a thin, uneven layer of white. No one complained about this. Salt did not need to be abundant to matter. A few grains could change an entire pot of food. When other ingredients were scarce, salt stepped forward quietly. It did not add richness or variety, but it gave shape to what was there. Without it, food tasted flat, unfinished. With it, even thin soup felt intentional. Salt was added late, never at the beginning. This prevented overuse. As the pot simmered, someone would taste a drop of liquid from the spoon, then pause. Only after that pause were a few grains sprinkled in, pinched carefully between fingers. The sound of salt hitting liquid was barely audible. There was no second chance. Once added, it could not be taken back. This made the moment important. Too much salt ruined the meal. Too little made it forgettable. The balance was learned through repetition, not measurement. On days when onions, spices, or vegetables were missing, salt carried the weight alone. It did not pretend to be more than it was. It simply sharpened what little flavor existed and made it clear enough to notice. Children learned to recognize the taste early. They did not ask for more. They knew there was no more to give. Salt was not something to crave, only something to accept. When the meal was served, no one spoke about flavor. Eating was not a time for comparison. Still, the presence of salt was felt. It turned water into soup, rice into a dish, lentils into something complete. Sometimes the jar was checked afterward, the lid lifted briefly to see how much remained. It was always less than before, but never gone. The jar returned to its place, waiting for the next careful pinch. When salt became the main flavor, it was not because it was preferred, but because it was dependable. It asked for nothing extra. It worked quietly, doing just enough. In the end, the meal tasted the way it was supposed to taste, not exciting, not rich, but finished. And that was all salt had ever been asked to do. Eating less was not announced or explained. It happened quietly, built into the way plates were filled and how quickly they were emptied. No one said the word tomorrow at the table, but it sat there with everyone, shaping each bite. Portions were smaller than they once had been, though no one remembered exactly when they changed. The eye adjusted before the mind did. What looked normal now would have seemed insufficient long ago, but time had softened that comparison. The plates did not look empty. They looked intentional. Eating slowly helped. It gave the body time to accept what it was given. Each mouthful was chewed longer than necessary, not out of effort, but out of habit. Pauses appeared naturally between bites. No one rushed to finish first. Finishing early meant noticing hunger sooner, and that was avoided. Children learned this without instruction. They watched the adults, matched their pace, followed their quiet cues. Asking for more was rare. When it happened, it was met with a calm look rather than a refusal. Usually, the child understood before words were needed. Eating less was not about discipline or restraint. It was about continuity. A full stomach today that caused an empty pot tomorrow was not considered success. The goal was balance, even if that balance leaned toward hunger. After the meal, plates were wiped clean with small pieces of bread or fingers. Nothing was left behind. Not because of desperation, but because leftovers belonged to the next meal, not the plate. The pot mattered more than individual fullness. Hunger did not disappear completely. It faded into something manageable, something that could be carried quietly through the afternoon or evening. A mild ache was familiar. It did not cause alarm. It simply reminded everyone why the routine existed. The remaining food was checked again after the meal. A lid was placed carefully. The pot was moved to a cooler corner. These actions were done slowly, respectfully, as if the future meal could sense how it was being treated. Later, when hunger returned, it was met with water, rest, or distraction. Sleep helped most. Sleeping early shortened the distance to the next meal. This too was part of the system, though no one spoke of it directly. Eating less was not framed as sacrifice. It was framed as normal. Tomorrow was not guaranteed by hope or luck, but by these small, repeated decisions. Each reduced portion made space for the next day to arrive with something still waiting. When night came and the house grew quiet, no one counted what they had eaten. They counted what remained. Knowing that tomorrow would exist in the form of a covered pot or a small bag of grain was enough to allow sleep to come. The body rested. The pot rested. And tomorrow, made possible by eating less today, waited patiently, just like everything else in the house. The cooking pots were old, older than most of the routines built around them. Their surfaces were darkened, uneven, marked by years of fire and careful use. Handles were worn smooth where hands had held them again and again. None of the pots matched each other, but each had a place. New pots were never discussed. The old ones worked, and that was enough. Replacing them would have required resources better saved for food. Besides, these pots were understood. Their weight, their balance, how quickly they heated and where they cooled, everything about them was familiar. One pot was known to cook rice evenly if the flame stayed low. Another was used for lentils because its base was thicker and less likely to burn. A smaller one existed for reheating, never for fresh cooking. These roles were not written down. They were remembered through use. Cracks were watched carefully. A pot with a small crack could still be trusted if handled gently. It was never filled to the top. It was never placed directly over a strong flame. Respect extended its life. Care turned weakness into something manageable. Old pots cooled slowly, which helped stretch meals. Food stayed warm longer without extra fuel. This mattered in quiet ways. It allowed second servings to feel fresh. It allowed leftovers to be reheated gently without burning. Washing the pots was done without hurry. They were not scrubbed harshly. Ash and warm water were used instead of soap, preserving the surface and saving resources. Each pot was dried thoroughly before being put away, because moisture shortened its life. Children were taught not to play with the pots, not because they were dangerous, but because they were essential. A broken pot was not an inconvenience. It was a problem that touched every meal. When a pot was finally too damaged to use, it was not thrown away immediately. It might be used to store dry items or hold water. Even then, it stayed part of the household. Nothing useful left easily. The calm importance of these old pots was rarely spoken about. They did not draw attention. They did not decorate the space. They simply made the routines possible, day after day, without asking for recognition. In their quiet reliability, the pots held more than food. They held planning, patience, and the memory of meals past. Each time one was placed on the fire, it carried the weight of everything it had already done, and the promise that it could do it again. As long as the pots remained, the household felt prepared. Not well supplied, not comfortable, but capable. And that sense of capability, built around old, steady tools, was what allowed everything else to continue calmly, without fear or urgency. The market was not visited in the morning, when stalls were full and prices firm. It was waited for. Time mattered more than choice. Everyone knew that the last hour before closing carried a different rhythm, slower and quieter, shaped by what remained rather than what was fresh. Meals were planned with this in mind. The day was structured around waiting, not going. There was no list, no expectation of finding anything specific. Planning meant leaving space for whatever might be available when the market was nearly done with the day. As closing time approached, the pace of the market softened. Sellers began packing, counting what they did not want to carry home. Vegetables with bent stems or bruised skin were pushed to the side. These were the items watched for, not because they were better, but because they were cheaper and still usable. A small amount of money was carried, folded tightly, never taken out too soon. Showing it early invited conversation and pressure. Waiting until the end allowed silence to do most of the work. Choices were made quickly, but not carelessly. A few tomatoes meant soup. A handful of greens meant mixing with lentils. If nothing appeared worth buying, nothing was bought. That too was part of the plan. Back home, the meal adjusted itself to the market's outcome. The pot was already waiting. Water was already ready. New ingredients were additions, not foundations. This made disappointment manageable. Planning around market closing time was less about saving money and more about accepting limits. It allowed meals to remain flexible, built around chance rather than expectation. When the day ended without purchases, no one reacted. The routine absorbed it. When something did come home, it was treated carefully, used slowly, stretched into more than one meal if possible. This approach removed urgency from shopping. There was no rush, no anxiety about missing out. The market would open again tomorrow. The pot would still be there. By planning meals around closing time, the household learned to work with what remained instead of what was offered. And in that quiet adjustment, scarcity felt less sharp, more predictable, and easier to carry into the next day. The oil was kept in a narrow bottle, darker than it needed to be, stained by time and careful pouring. It was never left near the edge of the shelf. It stood slightly back, where it would not be reached by accident. Oil was not rare, but it was never assumed. Before the bottle was touched, there was always a pause. Not a dramatic one, just long enough for thought to settle. Using oil changed a meal. It added richness, weight, and comfort, but it also reduced what remained for later. That trade was never taken lightly. The pot might already be warm. The ingredients might already be waiting. Still, the bottle stayed closed while the meal was considered again. Was oil necessary today, or merely desirable? Would water and salt be enough? Could the lentils soften without it? These questions were not spoken. They passed quietly through the mind. When oil was used, it was poured sparingly. The bottle was tilted just enough to release a thin line, never a pool. The sound it made when it hit the pot was soft, almost disappointing. There was no sizzle unless the fire was too strong, and strong fire was avoided. Oil changed the smell first. Even a few drops warmed the air differently, making the food feel more complete before it was even served. This was part of its power. It suggested fullness long before it delivered it. Because of this, oil was often saved for days when spirits felt low, not just stomachs. A meal with oil felt deliberate, planned, almost generous. Using it on an ordinary day felt wasteful, unless there was reason. Children noticed the difference without being told. They could tell when oil had been used by the way food moved on the plate, by the way it coated the mouth. They did not ask for it on other days. Asking would make its absence more noticeable. After pouring, the bottle was wiped carefully before being returned to its place. A single drip left on the outside was considered careless. Oil that escaped the pot was oil that served no one. When the meal was finished, the bottle was sometimes checked. The level inside was always lower than before, even if only slightly. That knowledge lingered longer than the taste. The long thought before using oil was not about fear of running out. It was about respect. Oil carried effort, cost, and future meals within it. Deciding to use it meant accepting that tomorrow would need to be planned a little more carefully. And so the bottle waited most days, untouched, patient. When it was finally opened, it was because the moment had been judged worthy, quietly, carefully, and without regret. Children were not taught to eat slowly through instruction. No one sat them down to explain it, and no rules were spoken aloud. They learned by watching, by matching the pace of the people around them, by noticing what happened when food was gone too quickly. At first, their movements were fast. Small hands reached for food eagerly, bites taken without pause. Hunger made them forget patience. But the table itself corrected this. When others were still eating and their own plate was already empty, the feeling was uncomfortable. Not painful, just noticeable. Waiting became part of the lesson. Adults ate without hurry. They lifted food carefully, chewed fully, paused between bites. Their plates lasted longer. Nothing was said, but children began to copy this rhythm naturally. Slowing down felt like belonging. There was also the warmth of food to consider. Eating too quickly meant not noticing it. When children slowed, they felt the heat of the soup, the softness of bread, the way flavors stayed longer in the mouth. Eating became something extended, not rushed. No one praised slow eating. Praise would have made it feel like effort. Instead, it became normal. A meal took as long as it took. Finishing early did not bring reward. Finishing at the same time as everyone else felt better. Sometimes a child would forget and eat too fast again. When that happened, they were not corrected. They simply sat with their empty plate while others continued. The silence did the work. They learned to stretch time along with food. Water helped. Small sips between bites created pauses without feeling forced. Soup helped even more. Thin soup slowed everything, spoonful by spoonful, warming the body gradually. Children learned to sip it carefully so it would last. Over time, eating slowly became instinct. Hands moved less urgently. Chewing lasted longer. Plates stayed fuller for more of the meal. Hunger did not disappear, but it softened, became manageable. This habit carried beyond the table. Eating slowly meant food stayed with them longer. It meant fewer requests later. It meant the household rhythm stayed balanced. By the time children grew older, they no longer thought about pace at all. Their bodies knew it. Slow eating felt natural, calm, unremarkable. It was one of the quiet skills learned early, like waiting for water to boil or watching firewood burn evenly. No one called it discipline. It was simply how things were done. In learning to eat slowly, children learned something else too, that food was not meant to be rushed through, even when there was little of it. It was meant to be respected, stretched gently through time, so that everyone reached the end of the meal together, without urgency, without complaint. The bread was already hard by morning. Left uncovered overnight, it had lost whatever softness it once had, turning dry and unyielding. No one was surprised by this. Fresh bread was not expected to remain fresh for long. Staleness was simply the next stage. The loaf was checked by pressing a finger against it. It did not give way. That meant it would not be eaten as it was. It would need help. The bread was never thrown out for being stale. That would have meant ignoring what it could still become. Water was brought first. A small bowl was filled, not to soak the bread completely, but just enough to touch it. Each piece was dipped quickly, one at a time, then set aside. The goal was to soften the surface without turning it into paste. Too much water ruined it. Too little changed nothing. Sometimes the bread was warmed instead. Placed near the fire, not over it, it absorbed heat slowly. The warmth loosened the inside just enough to make it chewable again. The smell of warming bread returned faintly, reminding everyone of when it had been fresh. Salt helped. A light sprinkle made the bread feel intentional, less like leftovers and more like a meal. On better mornings, a drop of oil was added to the pan before warming it, just enough to crisp the edges. This was rare, but memorable. Breakfast was quiet. Stale bread did not invite conversation. It was eaten slowly, often with water or thin soup. Each bite required effort, which naturally slowed the pace. This made the meal last longer than it should have. Children learned early that bread changed, but usefulness did not end with freshness. They did not complain. Complaining would not have softened it any faster. Instead, they adapted, just as the bread had. The crusts, once ignored, were now eaten first. They held up better after soaking or warming. Nothing was wasted. Even crumbs were gathered and added to soup later if possible. By the time the last piece was eaten, hunger had eased slightly. Not fully, but enough to begin the day. The bread had done its job again, despite being old. Stale bread becoming breakfast again was not clever or creative. It was routine. It was expected. It reminded everyone that food did not need to be perfect to be useful. When the plate was cleared and the bowl rinsed, the day continued as usual. The bread was gone. Breakfast had happened. And once more, something that seemed finished had quietly found a way to return. The discussion did not begin all at once. It unfolded slowly, between small actions, as the evening settled into the house. Bowls were rinsed. The pot was checked one last time. The fire was allowed to fade. Only then did the quiet consideration of tomorrow take shape. No one used the word hunger directly. It did not need to be named to be understood. Instead, questions were asked that circled around it. How much rice remained? Whether the lentils would last another day. If the market would be worth visiting in the morning or better left until evening. These thoughts were shared calmly, without worry in the voice. Panic would not change anything. Experience had taught that planning worked best when done evenly, without emotion. Tomorrow's hunger was treated like weather, something to be prepared for, not feared. The pantry was opened again, though it had already been checked earlier. Looking twice changed nothing, but it brought reassurance. The same small bag of rice. The same jar of salt. The same space where flour had been earlier. Everything was as expected. A suggestion was made quietly. Perhaps beans could be soaked tonight. Perhaps bread could be saved for morning. These ideas were not debated. They were acknowledged, absorbed into the plan without resistance. Children listened more than they spoke. They learned that evening was for thinking ahead, not for asking for more food. They understood that tomorrow belonged to these conversations, not to wishes. Sometimes the discussion ended without resolution. That was acceptable. Not every problem needed an answer right away. The act of thinking together was enough to feel prepared. As night deepened, the focus shifted from food to rest. Tomorrow would come whether it was planned perfectly or not. Still, the discussion had done its work. It had created a shape for the next day, even if the details remained unclear. Before sleep, the remaining food was covered carefully. The pot was placed where it would not be disturbed. These actions were part of the discussion too, carried out with hands instead of words. When everyone finally lay down, hunger was present, but softened. It felt less threatening when it had been acknowledged. Tomorrow's hunger had been considered, measured, and placed in its proper space. The house grew quiet. The conversation ended without ceremony. And in that silence, the plan for tomorrow rested, imperfect but sufficient, waiting to be tested by morning. Vegetables were never gathered into a pile. They were handled individually, one piece at a time, as if each one needed to be acknowledged before it was used. A single carrot, slightly bent. One tomato with a soft spot. A handful of greens missing their freshness. Nothing arrived together, and nothing was treated as if it could be replaced easily. Before cooking, the vegetables were laid out separately on a cloth. This was not for display, but for clarity. Seeing them apart made it easier to decide how long they could last. One piece today. Another tomorrow. Stretching vegetables was not about hiding them in food, but about spacing them through time. When a vegetable was chosen, it was cleaned slowly. Bruised parts were cut away with care, never more than necessary. What remained was sliced thin, thinner than most recipes would suggest. Thin pieces cooked faster, blended better, and appeared more numerous once mixed into water or lentils. A single tomato could flavor an entire pot if used correctly. It was chopped finely, allowed to dissolve rather than stand out. Its purpose was not to be noticed, but to quietly support everything else. The same was true for greens, which were torn rather than cut, scattered lightly so no one bite held too much. Often, only half of a vegetable was used. The rest was wrapped and saved, placed in the coolest part of the house. It would be checked later, turned if needed, used before it softened too much. Nothing was forgotten, but nothing was rushed. Children learned early not to expect vegetables in every meal. Their presence was irregular, almost surprising. This made them feel important when they appeared, even in small amounts. Complaints were rare. There was no habit of abundance to compare against. Using vegetables one piece at a time changed how meals were imagined. Instead of thinking in dishes, the household thought in additions. What could be added today that did not steal from tomorrow? Sometimes the answer was nothing, and that was accepted easily. The pot reflected these choices. Some days it held color. Other days it did not. Both were normal. A meal without vegetables was not considered incomplete. A meal with them was simply fortunate. Peels and stems were saved when possible. Onion skins joined their pouch. Carrot ends were added to water for warmth and faint taste. Even what could not be eaten still had a role. When the meal was served, no one counted vegetable pieces on their plate. They noticed only that the food tasted slightly different, slightly fuller. That was enough. Using vegetables one piece at a time was not about restraint. It was about awareness. Each piece carried more than nourishment, it carried time, effort, and the possibility of another meal. Treating them carefully allowed that possibility to last longer. And so vegetables passed through the house slowly, quietly, never all at once, leaving just enough behind to make tomorrow feel possible again. The potato was small, smaller than it should have been to matter much on its own. Its skin was rough, marked with shallow eyes and a few soft spots that suggested it had been waiting a while. Still, it was placed at the center of the cloth as if it were something significant. In a way, it was. Before anything was done, it was examined slowly. Turned once. Then again. The soft spots were pressed gently to see how much could be saved. Nothing was decided too quickly. A potato used well could belong to more than one person, more than one meal. When it was washed, the water was reused afterward. Even that step felt connected to stretching. The peel was removed thinly, almost transparently, so the shape of the potato barely changed. Thick peels wasted food. Thin peels respected it. The potato was not chopped into large pieces. That would have made its absence noticeable. Instead, it was sliced thin, then sliced again into smaller shapes. Once spread out on the board, it looked like more than it was. This illusion mattered, even if everyone understood it. Some pieces were added to the pot early, allowed to soften completely and disappear into the liquid. These thickened the meal, making it feel heavier. Other pieces were held back, added later so their shape remained. Seeing them on the plate reassured everyone that the potato had truly been used. No one received a full piece. That was never the plan. Each bowl carried a few slices, just enough to notice. Children learned not to count them. Counting invited comparison, and comparison led to dissatisfaction. The goal was shared presence, not equal quantity. Sometimes the potato was used twice. Half went into the main meal. The rest was wrapped carefully and saved for the next morning, perhaps to be warmed with stale bread or added to thin soup. A potato could bridge two meals if handled correctly. The peels were not discarded immediately. They were washed and dried, sometimes added to water later for warmth or faint flavor. Even when they were finally thrown away, it was done without hurry, as if acknowledging their contribution. When the meal was eaten, the potato did not stand out. It was not praised or discussed. It blended into the rhythm of eating, doing its work quietly. Still, everyone noticed the difference it made. The pot emptied more slowly. Hunger stayed away a little longer. Stretching a single potato was not cleverness. It was patience, practiced many times. It required restraint, attention, and trust in small changes. The potato did not fill the family, but it supported them, carrying the meal just far enough. When the bowls were cleared and the pot was set aside, the potato was gone. Nothing remained of it but the effect it had had. And that was enough. Water was usually measured in the mind before it was poured. Every pot, every bowl, every rinse carried a sense of limit. Because of this, finding extra water, unexpected, usable, and clean enough, brought a kind of relief that did not need words. It might come from a shared tap that ran longer than expected, or a container that held more than it appeared to. Sometimes it was rain collected quietly overnight, unnoticed until morning. However it appeared, it was greeted calmly, not with excitement, but with a loosening of tension. Extra water did not mean abundance. It meant flexibility. It allowed soup to be thinned without worry. It allowed beans to soak longer. It allowed dishes to be rinsed more carefully. Small comforts became possible without cost. When the extra water was discovered, nothing changed immediately. There was no rush to use it. Instead, it was set aside, marked mentally as available. Knowing it was there mattered more than using it right away. The pot benefited first. A ladle of water added to a thick meal extended it quietly, without changing its character. No one noticed the difference on the plate. The pot simply lasted longer. Hands were washed more freely. A cloth was rinsed thoroughly instead of just shaken clean. These small acts made the day feel lighter, even though nothing else had changed. Children sensed the shift without understanding its cause. Movements became less careful, less restrained. Not careless, just easier. Water softened the edges of routine. Extra water was never wasted. It was not poured where it was not needed. Relief did not turn into carelessness. It remained measured, appreciated quietly. When the water was finally used, there was no announcement. It disappeared into the routine, doing its work without attention. The relief it brought lingered longer than the water itself. Finding extra water did not solve problems, but it eased them. It made scarcity feel less tight, less immediate. And in that small easing, the day moved forward with less effort, the household carried on, steady and calm once again. Cooking rarely belonged only to the present moment. Even as the pot warmed and the fire settled, thoughts moved ahead quietly, reaching into days that had not yet arrived. Next week existed in the mind long before it appeared on the calendar. As ingredients were added, their absence was already noted. Each handful taken from the bag of rice came with an awareness of what would remain afterward. Each spoon of lentils stirred into the pot shifted the shape of meals still waiting to be planned. Cooking became a kind of quiet forecasting. There was no anxiety in this thinking. It happened naturally, like breathing. The hands worked while the mind counted. If rice was used today, bread would need to stretch tomorrow. If lentils were finished, beans would need to soak later in the week. The fire burned steadily, but attention drifted. Market days were remembered. Weather was considered. A week with rain might bring extra water. A dry week might mean more careful meals. These possibilities were folded gently into the plan without demanding certainty. Children played nearby, unaware that the meal before them was connected to many others yet to come. Adults watched the pot and thought about what could still be saved, what needed to be used before it spoiled, what could be delayed without harm. Cooking while thinking about next week shaped decisions subtly. Oil was withheld. Vegetables were sliced thinner. Portions were adjusted just enough to protect future meals. Nothing dramatic changed, but everything leaned slightly toward caution. The pot was stirred slowly, not because it required it, but because stirring gave time to think. Each turn of the spoon marked another thought about tomorrow, the next day, and the one after that. The rhythm of cooking supported the rhythm of planning. Sometimes plans were wrong. Something unexpected would arrive, or something expected would not. That was accepted. Planning was not about control. It was about readiness. When the meal was finally served, attention returned to the present. Plates were filled. Food was eaten. For a moment, next week faded into the background. But it never disappeared completely. It remained there, quiet and patient, waiting to shape the next set of decisions. Cooking had done more than prepare a meal. It had quietly prepared the days ahead. And so the routine continued, hands in the present, mind slightly ahead, always cooking with one eye on what was coming next. The spices were kept together in small containers, some glass, some metal, none of them full. Their lids fit tightly, not to preserve freshness alone, but to protect what little remained. Each container held more memory than quantity. Spices were not used to transform food. They were used to guide it gently, just enough to make repetition bearable. Because of this, measuring them required care. Too much spice today meant too little tomorrow, and tomorrow mattered just as much. Before any spice was added, the pot was tasted. Always tasted. This came first. Spices were not added out of habit or hope. They were added only when something was missing and only in response to that absence. A pinch was the standard measure. Fingers dipped lightly, collecting the smallest amount possible. The hand hovered for a moment before releasing it, as if reconsidering. That pause mattered. It was the difference between use and waste. Spices carried strength. Even a few grains could dominate a pot. Overuse could not be undone, and there was no extra food to balance it out. A ruined meal affected more than one stomach. This made caution necessary. On many days, spices were not used at all. Salt was enough. Water was enough. Saving spices was part of the routine, not a sign of deprivation. Their absence became normal, their presence noticeable. When spices were used, they were often mixed with water first, dissolved gently before meeting the heat. This helped spread their flavor evenly, making less feel like more. Nothing clumped or stood out. Children learned early that spices were not to be played with. Opening a container without reason was discouraged quietly. Curiosity gave way to understanding over time. After use, the containers were wiped and returned to their place. A quick glance inside often followed, noting the level left behind. This was not done with worry, only awareness. Spices, when measured with care, lasted longer than expected. They supported meals without drawing attention to themselves. They made familiar food feel finished rather than exciting. In the end, careful measuring was not about fear of running out. It was about balance. Spices were part of the future as much as the present. Using them thoughtfully meant that even in scarcity, there would still be moments, small and rare, when a meal carried a gentle hint of something more. Crumbs were never ignored. They appeared after every meal, scattered on the cloth, the floor, or the edge of a plate. Small as they were, each one carried the memory of effort, the grinding of grain, the heat of fire, the water that had been used. To let them go was to dismiss all of that. After the meal, hands moved carefully, gathering what could be saved. Bread crumbs were pressed together, added to thin soup, or sprinkled over leftover vegetables. Nothing was considered too small to matter. Even a few grains of rice were collected, rolled gently between fingers, and returned to the pot for tomorrow. Children learned this habit early, often before they understood why. Dropping food carelessly drew a quiet look rather than a reprimand. They were shown that every piece had a purpose, that nothing truly belonged to waste. Over time, their fingers learned to pick up what was lost without thinking. Crumbs were not only saved for food. Sometimes they were added to water for warmth, or mixed into a soft dough to thicken it slightly. The act of saving them was as much about respect as practicality. It reinforced patience, attention, and the slow rhythm of household life. Even when meals were meager, nothing was discarded. A small scrap could make the difference between a satisfying spoonful and disappointment. Over time, this habit shaped the household more than any single ingredient ever could. The constant care for the tiniest pieces ensured that scarcity never became complete absence. By the time the cloth was shaken and the floor cleaned, every crumb had been accounted for. The table was empty, but the effort of the meal lingered in what had been saved. In the quiet attention to even the smallest piece, the household found order, continuity, and a subtle reassurance that tomorrow could still be met. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was forgotten. And in that simple habit, life carried on steadily, quietly, without sudden need or surprise. Meals were simple. Always simple. Rice with water, lentils with salt, thin soup, a piece of bread, sometimes vegetables, sometimes not. There was no variation unless chance offered it. And yet, there were no complaints. Repetition was not tiresome because it had become expected. Each meal followed its quiet rhythm. Breakfast came with stale bread softened in water. Lunch might be rice mixed with a few lentils. Dinner could be a thin soup with a single vegetable added if it had been saved carefully. Nothing was lavish. Nothing was urgent. Still, the act of eating together carried its own satisfaction. Children learned early to accept the sameness. Questions about why the same again were met not with irritation, but with gentle explanations or a simple nod toward what remained. The answer was obvious: meals were what they were, and they were enough. Simple meals encouraged slow eating. When there was nothing exciting on the plate, bites were savored carefully. Portions lasted longer, and patience became part of the habit. Eating without haste made repetition easier to bear. Even in scarcity, these repeated meals carried quiet lessons: contentment, rhythm, and the knowledge that hunger, while present, could be managed. Nothing was wasted. Every small portion counted. And over time, the family found comfort in the predictability of what was served. Complaints faded because there was no point in voicing them. The simplicity of meals was neither punishment nor boredom, it was life. Acceptance became automatic, almost invisible, a habit built silently across years. In the repetition, the household discovered stability. The same ingredients, the same small routines, the same quiet meals, day after day, ensured that even with little, everyone could continue without worry, without disappointment, and without complaint. Satisfaction did not come from eating until the stomach was full. There was rarely enough food for that, and the household had long learned that expecting it led only to frustration. Instead, warmth became the measure of contentment: warm hands, warm bowls, warm water, warm food. The fire, carefully tended, provided the first comfort. Even before the meal was ready, the gentle heat in the kitchen eased tension, making the day feel lighter. The pot's warmth spread slowly, carrying reassurance that something nourishing existed, however small. When meals were served, bowls were hot, steam rising to brush faces. The warmth was immediate and tangible, even when the portions were thin. Each sip of soup, each bite of rice, carried that feeling inward. The body felt cared for, even if the hunger persisted. Children learned this instinctively. They noticed the heat before the quantity. A small piece of bread, warmed and softened in water, felt like a gift. They did not compare with what they might have had elsewhere. Comfort became the focus, not fullness. This lesson extended beyond eating. A shared blanket, a hot cup of water, the gentle light from the fire, these all became part of the household's understanding of satisfaction. Food alone was never enough. The experience of warmth gave it meaning. Even on days when the pot held little, warmth carried the promise of enough. It slowed the rush of hunger, eased impatience, and reminded everyone that care and attention mattered more than quantity. In time, this understanding shaped the rhythm of life. Meals were eaten slowly, portions were measured thoughtfully, and patience became natural. Warmth replaced longing, presence replaced complaint, and contentment quietly settled where fullness could not reach. And so, even when the stomach was not completely satisfied, the heart and mind learned to feel nourished. Satisfaction came not from what was inside, but from what surrounded it: heat, care, and the quiet steadiness of the household. The recipe had no name. It was not written anywhere. It was passed silently from hand to hand, meal to meal, year to year. Rice with lentils, thin soup, bread softened in water. These combinations never changed, yet they were reliable, comforting, and understood without instruction. No one questioned the repetition. The recipe did not need variation to remain useful. It was not meant to impress or excite, only to sustain. Each meal prepared in this way followed the same quiet rhythm: ingredients measured, water added carefully, fire tended steadily. The result was always similar, yet it was enough. Children learned the recipe early, not by being taught but by observing. They saw the same pot, the same gestures, the same order repeated endlessly. In time, their hands mirrored the adults' movements automatically. Cooking became less about innovation and more about continuity. Even when new ingredients appeared, extra vegetables, a bit of oil, a small pinch of spice, they were incorporated into the old method. The recipe itself did not change, it simply absorbed what was available. Adaptation was subtle, never disruptive. The long use of the same recipe carried more than flavor. It carried patience, rhythm, and memory. Every pot stirred reminded the household of meals past, lessons learned, and careful planning for meals still to come. It was a record of endurance, quietly maintained in repetition. No one ever expressed boredom with the meals. There was no need. The predictability itself brought comfort. Knowing what to expect allowed hunger to be managed, time to be organized, and energy to be preserved. When the meal ended, the recipe rested with the pot. Tomorrow, it would be used again. Perhaps the portions would differ slightly, the ingredients would shift, but the method would remain unchanged. It was a quiet anchor in a world of scarcity. The long use of the same recipe taught more than cooking. It taught steadiness, acceptance, and the power of routine. In its simplicity, it sustained not only the body but also the calm, measured life of the household. Hunger was never just a physical feeling. It stretched minutes, slowed hours, and reshaped the rhythm of the day. When food was scarce, time itself seemed to move differently, slower, heavier, more deliberate. Each moment became more noticeable because it carried the expectation of the next meal. Morning lasted longer when the stomach was empty. Waiting for water to boil or firewood to burn was no longer ordinary, it became an event. Children learned to sit quietly, counting not the hours but the slow transformations, the rising steam, the softening of bread, the swelling of soaked beans. Meals themselves were measured against this altered sense of time. Bites were taken slowly, portions stretched, and even drinking water became a method of pacing. Eating quickly was impossible, doing so would make the next pang sharper, the wait longer. Patience became not just a habit, but a necessity. Even chores were touched by hunger. Carrying water, cleaning, or preparing firewood was done with attention to the day's pace. The body and mind adapted to scarcity, slowing movement to conserve energy, stretching effort across time. What might have been hurried work in abundance became deliberate, careful action. Waiting for tomorrow became intertwined with the present. Planning meals, checking the pantry, saving portions, all these acts reshaped the household's calendar. The day was measured less by hours and more by scarcity, by what remained, and by what could be made to last. Hunger was subtle, yet constant. It was a quiet companion, guiding every decision, every movement, every thought. Its presence altered not just the stomach but the perception of the world, making even ordinary routines feel slower, longer, and more precious. By evening, when the last meal was eaten and the pot set aside, time seemed to relax slightly. Hunger had dictated the pace, and now the household could rest. Sleep became not just rest, but a bridge to the next stretch of carefully measured hours, another day shaped by patience, attention, and the slow rhythm that only scarcity could teach. Food was always limited, measured carefully, and stretched as far as it could go. Yet when the family ate together, what little existed seemed larger than it really was. Sharing created a quiet sense of abundance that no single portion could provide on its own. Plates were placed in the center. Each person took slowly, carefully, aware that the next hand would follow. Seeing others eat the same small portions created a rhythm. The eye and the mind tricked the stomach into feeling more satisfied. Food felt fuller simply because it was shared. Conversation was minimal, but presence mattered. Even the silence of everyone seated together added weight to the meal. The warmth of the bodies, the gentle movement of hands and spoons, the faint steam rising. All of it made the small amount of food feel complete. Children learned early that eating alone was not the same. Sharing stretched both food and patience. They learned to wait, to pace themselves, to watch others, and in doing so, discovered that meals could feel generous even when portions were tiny. Even when the pot was nearly empty, eating together gave it significance. Each bite carried the quiet assurance that everyone had what they needed, not because there was plenty, but because care and presence made it enough. In the household, sharing meals did more than fill the stomach. It created a sense of unity, slowed the pace of eating, and magnified small portions into a feast. Even scarcity was softened when the family gathered, teaching that the value of food often came not from quantity, but from being together. Acceptance was quiet. It was not spoken aloud, not taught in lessons or lectures. It was learned through repetition, through noticing that portions were small, that ingredients were limited, and that every day required careful planning. The household moved through scarcity with a gentle rhythm, shaped by habit rather than force. Meals were taken as they came. If bread was stale, it was softened and eaten. If lentils were thin, they were stretched with water. If oil or vegetables were missing, the meal continued without complaint. Each act of adjustment became routine, a way of smoothing over the gaps between need and availability. Children absorbed this quietly. They observed elders eating slowly, measuring portions, pausing before taking another bite. They learned that accepting less was not punishment or disappointment, but a part of daily life. It shaped patience, attention, and awareness. Acceptance extended beyond the table. Chores, firewood, water, and cooking were all handled with the same quiet understanding. Work was paced to match resources. Effort was stretched gently over time, never rushed, never wasted. Even hunger became familiar, softened by routine. It was acknowledged, not resisted. A mild ache in the stomach reminded everyone of scarcity, but it did not cause panic. The household had learned to carry less and still function steadily. The gentle routine of accepting less created calm. Life was predictable in its limitations, and that predictability offered comfort. Every small portion, every careful act, reinforced the idea that survival was not about abundance but about measured use and quiet endurance. By evening, when the fire dimmed and the house grew still, acceptance lingered in the air. Less had been enough. Tomorrow could be managed. And in that gentle understanding, the household rested, steady and untroubled, shaped not by excess but by careful, enduring habit. Cooking was never just a series of movements. It was thought before it began, considered in quiet moments while water boiled or firewood smoldered. Each step depended on what had come before and what might be needed tomorrow. Planning guided every action, often more than the cooking itself. Before the pot was placed over the fire, ingredients were counted, measured, and imagined. How much rice remained? How long would the lentils need to soften? Was there enough water to stretch the meal into tomorrow? Each answer shaped the choices that followed. Firewood was arranged carefully, not simply to cook faster, but to conserve heat and extend the flame. Water was added slowly, in stages, so it would last as long as possible. Even stirring was deliberate, timed to allow observation and reflection. Children learned to watch before touching. They saw that every small movement mattered and that thinking ahead prevented waste. They understood that cooking was as much about decisions and preparation as it was about heat, pots, and spoons. Spices, oil, and vegetables were considered in advance. Was today the day they could be used, or should they be saved for later? Each addition was weighed against future meals. The act of cooking itself became a kind of planning in motion. Meals emerged not as spontaneous creations, but as careful executions of thought. Water and salt, bread and lentils, became parts of a system, stretched and shaped by deliberate attention. Each plate served was the result of quiet foresight, not hurried action. By the time the family sat to eat, the meal felt steady and measured. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was overused. Every small portion had been placed with intention, and that planning gave comfort beyond the taste or fullness of the food. In this household, cooking was patience made tangible. Action followed thought, and thought guided action. The routine of planning before doing shaped not only meals, but the rhythm of the day, the pace of life, and the quiet endurance that carried the household forward. Life in the household was measured in portions. Rice, lentils, bread, vegetables, oil, everything had its place, its size, its limit. Each portion was considered before it was served, every bite weighed quietly against the needs of tomorrow. The household functioned on this rhythm, not abundance. Portions were not uniform, but they were fair. Children learned early to receive only what was given, neither more nor less. Adults adjusted their own plates to ensure that small ones stretched farther. Even a tiny pinch of rice could feed a child if served thoughtfully. Care extended to preparation. A handful of lentils was soaked with foresight. Water was measured to soften them just enough. Oil was added sparingly, only where it could make the most difference. Each decision reflected the understanding that today's meal could affect tomorrow's. Leftovers were treated with the same care. Crumbs, peels, softened bread, everything was gathered, reused, and incorporated wherever possible. Nothing was wasted because even a small portion could influence the household's stability. Portions shaped behavior. Eating was slow, deliberate. Pauses between bite-stretched meals allowed children to learn patience, and made small quantities feel more substantial. Hunger was managed, not indulged. Even social routines were influenced. Family members waited their turn at the table, watched each other, and learned that sharing was essential. Careful portions reinforced cooperation and awareness. Everyone relied on everyone else, and the act of dividing food became a quiet lesson in balance. In this life built around careful portions, abundance was not expected. Satisfaction came from use, from planning, from stretching small amounts into enough. The household grew resilient, patient, and steady. Through each measured bite, each deliberate choice, the family discovered a quiet security: life could continue, hunger could be managed, and tomorrow could arrive with something still waiting. In careful portions, the household found its rhythm, its order, and its endurance. Sacrifice was never dramatic. It was not announced with words or celebrated with ceremony. It lived quietly in every decision, every measured bite, every small portion held back for another day. In this household, sacrifice was routine, steady, and calm. When a handful of rice was divided, a bit went to one person, a bit to another. Sometimes adults ate less so children could have more. Sometimes soup was watered down so it would last longer. Each choice required awareness, but no one complained. Sacrifice was understood as a necessity, not a burden. Children learned by observation. They saw elders pause before taking a bite, taste carefully, and decide whether to leave a small amount for later. They copied this restraint naturally. Over time, the act of giving up something small became instinctual, part of the household rhythm. Sacrifice extended beyond food. Firewood was used sparingly. Water was measured. Even attention, who cooked, who cleaned, who carried what, was divided to preserve energy for the next day. Life itself was organized around conserving what mattered most. The calm discipline of sacrifice shaped behavior quietly. Meals lasted longer. Resources stretched farther. Patience became automatic. Hunger was softened, not ignored, and every choice reinforced the understanding that less today could secure more tomorrow. Nothing was dramatic. Nothing was hurried. Sacrifice was not self-denial for its own sake, it was a steady, silent commitment to continuity. In its calm rhythm, the household moved through scarcity without panic, frustration, or resentment. At the end of the day, when plates were cleared and the fire dwindled, the sacrifices made quietly throughout the day rested alongside the family. They had secured the next meal, preserved tomorrow, and strengthened the rhythm of life. Discipline and sacrifice were intertwined, not as punishment, but as steady, enduring care that carried everyone forward. Even in scarcity, memories of abundance lingered. Elders often recalled seasons when food had been easier to come by. Markets full of fresh vegetables, loaves of bread that stayed soft for days, pots of lentils simmering freely without careful measuring. These recollections were quiet, shared in glimpses, not longing. Children listened, wide-eyed but unexpectant. They did not know those seasons themselves, only the careful life of measured portions. Yet hearing of abundance gave a subtle context to the routines they lived, showing that scarcity was not eternal, but a phase to be navigated patiently. The memories influenced how meals were prepared now. Elders would recall how lentils could be cooked with more water, rice without stretching, or vegetables added generously. These images guided careful decisions, how to stretch, how to save, and how to make little feel sufficient. Even the taste of food carried echoes of those better seasons. Salt seemed sharper, bread softer in memory than in reality, and warmth from the fire reminded everyone of days when meals had arrived easily. It was not a source of envy, but a subtle encouragement, a reminder that patience and care were ways to endure until easier days might return. Remembering did not replace planning. It did not change what was on the plate. But it shaped understanding. Scarcity was easier to bear when framed against memory, when the household could see that the rhythm of hunger was part of a larger cycle. The quiet sharing of these memories became a ritual of its own. Even the briefest recollection softened frustration, provided guidance, and reinforced patience. Life continued with measured portions, calm sacrifice, and steady planning, always informed by the knowledge that abundance had existed once, and perhaps would again. In this way, the household carried history gently, using memory to shape the present without complaint, teaching children that scarcity was temporary and endurance was steady, reliable, and enough. The pot was clean, the fire ready, and the ingredients familiar. Rice, lentils, water, salt, once more, the same combination would be transformed into a meal. There was no excitement, no novelty, only the quiet work of preparing what was needed, as it had always been done. Hands moved automatically, measuring rice with care, stirring lentils slowly, adjusting water to achieve just the right consistency. Each step had been repeated countless times, yet each required attention. Mistakes were costly, there was no surplus to cover them. Children watched or helped in small ways, learning the rhythm of repetition. They knew the taste, the texture, the smell. They understood that meals were not meant to surprise, but to sustain. Even the act of preparing the same food again carried a lesson in patience and steady attention. There was comfort in repetition. The familiarity of the meal made planning easier, reduced waste, and ensured that each portion was stretched as far as possible. Knowing exactly what to expect allowed the household to work efficiently, making every small measure count. Sometimes the same meal brought quiet satisfaction. The aroma of lentils mingling with rice, the soft steam rising from the pot, the warmth of the fire, all these small details made the ordinary feel meaningful. Repetition did not diminish care, it reinforced it. The routine of preparing the same meal yet again shaped the household. It taught consistency, endurance, and respect for what little was available. It reminded everyone that food was not just sustenance, it was a practice, a rhythm, and a quiet reflection of patience that carried forward into the next day. And when the meal was finally served, bowls filled, and hands reached slowly, the household experienced the subtle triumph of continuity. Scarcity remained, but in preparing the same meal again, life had been maintained, carefully, quietly, and with steady care. Plates were not always full, and portions were small. Yet when meals were placed at the table, the act of sharing created something larger than the sum of the food itself. One plate divided among many carried not just sustenance, but reassurance, patience, and quiet strength. Each person took slowly, mindful of what remained. No one ate greedily, and no one went first without waiting. The shared ritual made small portions stretch farther, teaching that the presence of others could multiply what seemed scarce. Children learned early that sharing was survival as much as kindness. They observed adults leave a bit behind, pass a slice, or pause before taking another spoonful. The lesson was subtle: food alone did not nourish, cooperation and care did. There was comfort in repetition. The familiarity of the meal made planning easier, reduced waste, and ensured that each portion was stretched as far as possible. Knowing exactly what to expect allowed the household to work efficiently, making every small measure count. Sometimes the same meal brought quiet satisfaction. The aroma of lentils mingling with rice, the soft steam rising from the pot, the warmth of the fire, all these small details made the ordinary feel meaningful. Repetition did not diminish care, it reinforced it. The routine of preparing the same meal yet again shaped the household. It taught consistency, endurance, and respect for what little was available. It reminded everyone that food was not just sustenance, it was a practice, a rhythm, and a quiet reflection of patience that carried forward into the next day. And when the meal was finally served, bowls filled, and hands reached slowly, the household experienced the subtle triumph of continuity. Scarcity remained, but in preparing the same meal again, life had been maintained, carefully, quietly, and with steady care. Plates were not always full, and portions were small. Yet when meals were placed at the table, the act of sharing created something larger than the sum of the food itself. One plate divided among many carried not just sustenance, but reassurance, patience, and quiet strength. Each person took slowly, mindful of what remained. No one ate greedily, and no one went first without waiting. The shared ritual made small portions stretch farther, teaching that the presence of others could multiply what seemed scarce. Children learned early that sharing was survival as much as kindness. They observed adults leave a bit behind, pass a slice, or pause before taking another spoonful. The lesson was subtle: food alone did not nourish, cooperation and care did. Even the smallest morsel felt significant when distributed among the family. A piece of bread, a spoonful of lentils, a thin slice of vegetable, each became more than it was because it was shared. The act of dividing created a quiet satisfaction that fullness alone could not provide. The habit extended beyond meals. Daily life, chores, and firewood distribution were approached the same way, with attention to fairness, pacing, and consideration for others. Sharing taught restraint and patience, and made the household stronger than any individual portion could. When plates were finally emptied, the sense of strength lingered. Scarcity remained, but no one felt alone in it. Shared plates carried more than food, they carried unity, calm endurance, and the quiet knowledge that, together, the household could stretch even little into enough. In the repetition of this practice, life gained stability. Hunger was less sharp, patience was cultivated, and shared meals became the silent backbone of the family's daily rhythm. As the fire dimmed and the last meal was finished, the household rested with a quiet satisfaction. Plates were empty, pots were set aside, and the evening carried a calm that came not from fullness, but from having just enough. Nothing had been wasted. Every grain of rice, every softened piece of bread, every pinch of lentils had been measured, stretched, and used carefully. The act of making food last had created a subtle contentment that did not depend on abundance. Children lay down without complaint. Hunger still lingered lightly, but it was manageable, softened by the rhythm of careful portions and shared meals. The routine of daily planning, slow eating, and measured use carried them through. Adults moved quietly, checking the fire, covering the pot for tomorrow, and setting aside what little remained. These small actions ensured continuity, a steady bridge to the next day. Even scarcity felt controlled, predictable, and safe. Ending the day with just enough was not a triumph, nor was it a lesson spoken aloud. It was a quiet, repeated practice that shaped the household's rhythm. Enough meant survival. Enough meant care. Enough meant that tomorrow could begin calmly, with the same steady patience that carried everyone through today. In this gentle balance, life continued, simple, deliberate, and measured, where having just enough was not deprivation, but a quiet, enduring strength that sustained the family in body and spirit. Night fell softly over the household, and with it came the pause from labor and the quiet of rest. Yet even in sleep, thoughts of food lingered, not as worry or fear, but as careful consideration of what tomorrow would bring. The mind measured what remained in the pantry. A handful of rice, a small pot of lentils, a few vegetables saved from today. Plans formed silently, which portions to use first, what could be stretched, and how water and fire would be managed. Sleep carried these thoughts gently, like a soft undercurrent beneath rest. Children curled under blankets, unaware of the calculations, yet their bodies mirrored the household rhythm. Hunger was present, but tempered by the steady routine that had carried them through each day. Dreams were slow, unhurried, colored faintly by memories of meals past and imaginings of meals yet to come. Adults rested with a quieter consciousness, letting the mind wander over tomorrow's choices while the body relaxed. The act of planning did not interrupt sleep. It layered over it, a gentle preparation for continuity. Each decision made today quietly ensured that tomorrow could arrive with less anxiety and more calm. Sleeping while thinking of tomorrow's meal became part of the household rhythm. Scarcity shaped not only actions but rest, teaching endurance, patience, and the subtle art of managing what little existed. Food was never far from thought, yet its presence in sleep was not troubling. It was simply part of life's quiet structure. And so the night passed. The house was still. Hunger slept alongside the family, softened by care and planning. By the time morning arrived, the quiet contemplation of what was to come had already set the tone, readying everyone to face the day with measured hands and steady hearts. Life in the household moved in quiet cycles, and at the center of each day was the routine of eating carefully. Meals began, portions were measured, and food was stretched as far as possible. Each action was deliberate, not hurried, and every bite carried more than nourishment. It carried patience, planning, and the awareness of tomorrow. The routine repeated endlessly. Rice with lentils, bread softened in water, thin soup, small vegetables, these meals followed one another without variation, yet each held purpose. Children learned to pace themselves, adults monitored portions, and everyone understood that careful eating was the backbone of survival. Even when hunger pressed gently, no one rushed. The pace of eating matched the pace of life, slow and steady. Crumbs were saved, water measured, and nothing was wasted. Each meal was a lesson in endurance, a quiet practice of making little serve as much as possible. This routine was more than habit, it shaped perception. Food felt sufficient not because there was abundance, but because care and attention made each portion meaningful. Eating slowly, sharing plates, planning for tomorrow, these actions transformed scarcity into a manageable, even steady, rhythm.